This video is sponsored by Opera GX. So I've been playing a lot of games on PC recently, including the one that we're covering today, and I've quickly realized that web browsers are greedy. They can clog up your RAM, your CPU, and your bandwidth, which is why Opera GX is perfect for gamers. It has a customizable limiter on each of these things so that you can easily keep all of your tabs open without harming the performance of your game. Let's say you want to check and see who's live on Twitch. Boom, everyone you follow right there in the sidebar. Want to check Twitter, want to link your music, want to chat in Discord, it's all right there. You want to pop out a video and not just listen to it while you multitask? You can, and not just from YouTube. Opera didn't ask me to show this part, but one of my favorite integrations is the GX Corner. It has a little release date calendar so I can plan out how quickly I'm going to blow all of my money on new games, and even shows you what's free and on sale right now. Opera GX is the real deal. It's available on mobile, and if you're worried about swapping browsers because of bookmarks and passwords, it's as easy as settings, import bookmarks and settings, click import, and done. Oh, and it's free. Probably should mention that. So make sure to click my link in the description to download Opera GX for free today. Thanks again to Opera GX for sponsoring, and with that said, do you like card games? It's a rainy July evening. Your family is visiting relatives, and the house is filled with the gentle pitter-patter of rain on the windows, and your loved ones shooting the breeze. Someone proposes a game of Uno to pass the time, and so you all gather around the table. The cards are dealt. Your little cousin states that the official rules of Uno, contrary to popular belief, do not allow you to stack or chain draw fours and draw twos. If someone uses one on you, you must simply draw the cards and pass your turn. Your uncle shuts this down, saying, yeah, but we've always played it the other way. House rules. You can still stack draw fours and draw twos, and make the next person draw 8 or 12 or whatever. The rest of the family happily agrees because that's how they've always played. Your cousin reluctantly nods and picks up his hand, and the game begins. In that moment, you and your family have entered into a contract, a sacred place in agreement that Dr. Jan Clabbers calls the Magic Circle. In this circle, all parties have agreed upon a set of rules and to abide by them for the sake of having an enjoyable game. The goal of Uno, of course, is to get rid of all your cards, which you could do by tossing them into the center of the table and yelling, "I'm out," but you don't do that to preserve the experience for yourself and others. It's a unique suspension of real logic and disbelief that humans sometimes do for the sake of constructing a good time for everyone at the table. A baseball field is a magic circle, a table with 2 decks is a magic circle, a majestic open world filled with secrets is a magic circle, and in a way, a stage is a magic circle where every single one of us accepts the temporary rules of this place, despite how absurd or inconvenient they may be. The Magic Circle is the reason D&D works, is the reason you are probably playing Monopoly wrong yet still finding entertainment, and it's the reason games can be immersive. And it's why a little title called Inscryption is an absolute madhouse of a game, because Inscryption doesn't have... I'm getting ahead of myself. This video will be heavily spoiling Inscryption, which is a perfectly normal game. In fact, you'll get the most out of this if you've already played it. At this timestamp, I will begin discussing major spoilers, so if you haven't played yet, it's okay to watch for a bit, but when we get here, I'll make a last call, at which point I highly recommend you go play the game for yourself. It is very ordinary, nothing of note happens. It will be fun, and that is all. So, let's get this started by talking Inscryption and just how normal it really is. Inscryption is a game that I knew was not normal upon booting up. I had heard whispers across the web that this was the next Doki Doki, that this was a super self-aware horror game, that this was some next-level mind-melting meta-narrative that needed to be experienced unspoiled, which is why I'm doing my damnedest to keep it from being spoiled for you. But when I hopped in, I noticed it was just a card game, a really gritty, tough, feels good, sounds even better tabletop roguelike card game. Or is it roguelite? Whatever. Sure, maybe there was something else going on top of this. Right from the start, the new game button was corrupted, this card had an attitude about me sacrificing him in a previous game, and I had no clue who this was, so the game definitely had bigger plans than just this tabletop gauntlet. But a ton of the early game was dominated for me by just trying to get past each of this thing's challenges. I found myself enchanted by this strange place and how it felt to be here, playing cards with a stranger. We often talk about immersion in games, but psychologists generally prefer the term spatial presence, which is generally defined as when the contents of media are perceived as real in the sense that you feel a sensation of being spatially located in the mediated environment. If you are spatially present, you feel transported here. You feel less like a viewer and more like a participant in this space. One meta-analysis found that spatial presence is more vivid when it takes advantage of audio and visual cues to make the environment feel more coherent and alive. Think the sounds of wildlife and wind adding to the palette of Ghost of Tsushima, the sound of your armor clanking in Dark Souls making you feel the weight of the chosen undead, blood on the camera lens in any shooter, footsteps in Breath of the Wild that change sound depending on what you're stepping on, or loading screens in Metroid Dread that show Samus physically waiting instead of just a stock loading screen. All small things you're certainly familiar with, but go a long way in keeping you present in the world that the game is creating. And Inscryption is no exception to this. It does a masterful job of facilitating that sensation of there-ness when you're locked into it. Cards dance, flip, and snap into position with lovely audio to make the cards feel wildly tactile and tangible. Teeth aren't just placed, they are dropped into the scale and the bowl, sometimes spilling out onto the table. I felt every clank with every drop, just like I felt most of the actions that took place on the table. The game almost communicates a sense of touch with just its sound design. This guy's heavy, inhuman voice complements the dialogue, and tiny spoiler and self-harm trigger warning, here's a timestamp for you. If you gouge out your eye to use as a weight on the scale, your vision is appropriately distorted. You now have an actual blind spot in your field of vision, so when this happened to me, I had to physically feel around with my mouse when there was something on that side of the board I wanted to grab. I even cheated with the right-click rulebook to make sure I was grabbing the right thing because I couldn't see the damn thing. And that feeling of being there only grew when I discovered that I could get up and walk around the room. The palpable little noises that accompany the puzzles on the wall, and the way— Look at that, I lost my sense of time and got ahead of myself again. Yeah, we're about to talk spoilers, so if you haven't played this, as my boy Lambhoot would say, you better skedaddle. Go play this game if you haven't, it's on PC. Because I'm about to spoil this game faster than you can say Tobey Maguire was in the new Psych. The magic circle is the reason the game works, is the reason you are probably playing Monopoly wrong yet still finding entertainment, and it's the reason games can be immersive. And it's why a little title called Inscryption is an absolute madhouse of a game, because Inscryption doesn't have just one magic circle. This is a roguelike hidden in an escape room based on an RPG regurgitated into another game that has the qualities of the first three genres built on top of secret information that references real-world events. Oh, and there is a found footage horror movie in there somewhere. Trying to pin down what kind of game Inscryption is like trying to decide what kind of sandwich a Dodge Ram is. Don't try it, you're just gonna hurt your teeth. When I played my first round of cards in Leshy's cabin, it was simple. I had agreed to a contract for one magic circle. I was going to play Inscryption as best I could, whilst following the rules that the game had set for me. This was different from Uno in that the game has laws that are enforced by the software instead of rules that are enforced by your uncle, but the magic circle still works the same. I was here to experience the game, and the game is defined by its mechanics, by its rules. However, when Leshy told me that I could get up from the table, I began to notice things, like how this door was locked and hiding something strange behind it. I found clues both in the room, like this combination for the safe in the rulebook, and in the tabletop game itself, like this 11 o'clock carving on the board late in a run. I also saw things like these card configurations in the painting, and so I eventually tried to replicate them in-game, even if picking those cards wasn't really best for my current build, or even if this layout of cards wasn't the best strategy for this particular round. I also discovered that I could cheat the card game by grabbing extra teeth off the skull. In my experience at least, the fact that Leshy lets you get up and explore the room does a few critical things. One, it expands the scope of the magic circle because Leshy allows these new competitive edges. 2, it makes it clear that this is not just a roguelike. This is now an escape room puzzle. The magic circle has outgrown the table and has engulfed the cabin itself. Winning the card game becomes much less of a priority as it transforms into a means to find a way to uncover more clues and advantages. All in all, the goal of the game has morphed. I was no longer playing just baseball, now I was playing some bizarre baseball chess crossover. We're doing something strangely specific, like pulling off a bunt with no outs in the 3rd inning got me another rook and an extra turn. Inscryption makes you treat this card game that it spent all this time polishing as a cipher to decode the encryption on the larger puzzle that is Leshy's cabin. The game was a game, but now it's a key. So much so that by the time you finally do get all you need to escape, it's almost a formality to beat Leshy. Which I did. I beat him, his last candle went out, I escaped the cabin, credits rolled, I was left deeply impressed, and then I went to go catch up on my dress up, Demon Slayer. Or at least, that's what I expected to happen. What the fuck?
Hey there, card gamers. I'm the Lucky Carter, and this is another pack opening video. Today I am opening Catch Monsters packs and digging for that epic shiny Transcendence! And here I'll add some crazy VFX with.
Is this what I look like when I'm making videos?
Yeah. There's a set of coordinates on this card.
Oh, we're really doing this.
Okay.
Oh, we're really doing this.
What the fuck?
What in the Jumanji?
Guys, are you seeing this?
Oh, hell no. Put that back. Hang on. Is this a real YouTube channel? What the fuck? Yeah, so Inscryption is a game that Luke Carter here has in his possession, and somehow you, the player, also have in your possession. And it became apparent to me in this footage that what I was seeing was not just my decisions as a player, but a recording of what Luke did with his time, which is why I got strange commentary like this throughout the first stretch of the game.
Okay, time to figure out what's on this thing. Oh my, I think I just beat him!
And when I rebooted Inscryption and used the new game option that Leshy had locked away, the game changed completely, of course, but suddenly I felt less transported to the in-game world and more transported to my desk. My spatial presence in the game had left me. My entire frame of reference shifted, and now this was not about a card game or an escape room. Now this was about solving the same mystery Luke was trying to solve. It was about trying to understand what the hell this game even is. Which is something you rarely feel, and it's one reason that fourth wall breaks like this work so well. Usually a game is captivating because it draws you into its world, but games like Doki Doki, Undertale, the Stanley Parable, and Inscryption affect you so deeply because they bring their world to you. Now the area you're occupying is not a cabin, but your desk, or wherever you happen to be playing, and that's okay, because soon the game's magic circle will be extending there as well, in some truly stressful ways, but we'll loop back to that in a bit. One thing worth noting from the meta-analysis on spatial presence I mentioned earlier is that a media system's vividness improves if your senses that are not stimulated by the media are actually suppressed or minimized. Basically, if you feel, smell, see, or hear something outside of the media that doesn't match, it'll break the illusion and you'll get distracted from the game. Which is why most games assault your senses with as much as they can so that you feel like Spider-Man. But interestingly, after this impressively palpable and fleshed out environment, you are tossed into a very minimalist one. The buffet of glorious audiovisual feedback is discarded for pixelated text boxes and a handful of chiptune melodies. The game seems much more like something you'd actually be able to play on a floppy disk, and consequently, it's much less immersive. It doesn't transport you anywhere, and I think that's the point. By the time I was here, it was no longer about being pulled into the game. I had already had that. Now, it was time to get to the bottom of this. The card game's new mechanics were cool, and I enjoyed them, but the real meat and potatoes of my time here was ultimately to answer questions like, what ended up happening to Luke Carter? What is the old data? What's so sinister about it? Why was the new game icon hidden away? What was this card back then? Who is this girl? Why do the important bits of these videos keep corrupting? What even is this game? And trying to uncover those answers about the game became the game. For me, playing was no longer about winning, it was about understanding. Every step towards completing a portion of the game was really just a step towards more footage and more answers. Finally, I was able to knock off the 4 scribes, and I just knew that I was about to get some concrete answers. I got my opening hand for what was sure to be my last round of Inscryption. Nothing I could do was going to ruin this, I thought to myself. I was wrong. The last stretch of this game sort of tied together everything I had done up until this point. I would explore the same map from before in a new format, play the same card game I had learned with a new coat of paint, and try to escape a lab instead of a cabin. Except this time, I knew what I knew, and I was unfazed by any of the presentation. Sure, I enjoyed having that lovely feedback again. I happily welcomed the new card transforming mechanics, but again, this was still about solving a mystery, so the card game was still a means to an end. Until I got to this. I have never been as simultaneously intrigued and nervous in a boss fight as I was during my encounter with the Archivist. This was more than just an opponent. It was a parasite. It asked for access to my hard drive. I tried to say no, but... So I played along, and just like that, the magic circle had leaked into my computer's memory. The Archivist asked me to show them a very large file, and sure enough, there was my very personal, very no longer tucked away files just in the game. And so appropriately, I used the MP4 for the old 4th wall Psych of Play as ammo, since the file size was pretty hefty. And then later, they asked me to find a file that was very important to me that I would have had for quite a long time. The oldest file I could find was this quite dated MP4 of an episode I did on Tetris 99. I halfway expected it to just be ammo again, but... oh. Now things ended up working out for me. I used that file to win the game, but the Archivist, much like every new iteration of the game before this, continually added real estate to where this game was played. What began as a card game on a virtual table was now a meta-narrative that extended beyond the cabin to a digital world, my desk, my files, and eventually the internet. The next boss, Golly, connects the game to the web and pulls cards made from other users, images off the internet, and even your friends on Steam to make new cards for you to fight against. The longer you play Inscryption, the more the game invades the real world, the more magic circles multiply, layer, and stack on top of one another. The game already had roots in reality, but now those roots are growing, drinking, making this software on your computer so much more than just a game, which is exactly how Luke Carter must have felt. So when PO3 has this dialogue, it is very much earned because of how you got here. Grimora deletes the game, it's sad for everyone involved, things come full circle with a pickup game against Leshy, my heart hurt for him as I shook his hand, and there's an incredibly subtle reference to Yu-Gi-Oh! At the end. You probably didn't even notice the really vague nod to it. More sad, I found out the fate of our buddy Luke, and somewhere in there I came across the woodcarver again, who told me that all that was left was the old data, which she recommends I do not access. Then she said, and she was right. It couldn't possibly be that bad, could it? It's important to note that there are some loose ends here, like How did a copy of Inscryption end up online if the upload was stopped? What did these numbers in the found footage mean? Who is this? What is the old data? And these are questions that can only be answered if you solved the ARG or alternate reality game the developer Daniel Mullins built into this. Remember earlier in the game when you finish watching that first round of footage and then you get this kind of boot up screen for the second act of the game? Well, if you Control-C and interrupt the loading, you can actually access the old data, but it's encrypted and you need a cipher to decode it. But what on earth could that cipher possibly be? This ARG had everything. You had to open the game's files and trigger an event that would crash the game to get a code. You had to reference Europe's oldest card game to understand a clue. You had to trigger an event in the old outdated demo of the game to get part of the cipher. There was a group of folks who went to the actual coordinates Luke Carter went to and dug up a copy of a floppy disk that only had another clue on it. I won't go into detail on how it all got done or what the secret was. This video by Flemonade does a lovely job of recapping how these real-life Nick Cages stole the Declaration of Inscrypt-dependence. But the fact that there is an ARG tied into this only adds another layer to the game and only extends the reach of the magic circle even further. Keep in mind, Inscryption began as a roguelike card game and slowly, methodically evolved into a grand mystery that only the most dedicated team of folks desperate for answers could solve. And is it the first game to have an ARG built into it? More than likely, no. Other ARGs have been done, but this is my first experience with them personally. But what I thought was especially impressive was that Inscryption was able to jump around from genre to genre, style to style, and yet still feel so incredibly coherent. It wasn't just swapping to a new genre, it was reinventing itself, it was reiterating its laws. The way it continued to seamlessly add rules while simultaneously using those rules as a way to explore a larger, lingering narrative dynamically affected me in a way that few games have. Puzzles that require an understanding of the card game, clues that only make sense much later in the game, like this key found in Act 2 that you'll use in Act 3, this 11 o'clock carving that only becomes relevant much later, the code from here only being reusable when you can restart the game. Hell, even the way the camcorder's menu is a 2x4 frame just like the battlefield. In so many ways, Inscryption echoes its DNA in every layer of its time with you, so that despite how much it jerks you around, it all feels eerily connected. Inscryption feels alive, ever growing, ever expanding like a cancer until it meets you in the real world and you find yourself obsessing over its secrets like the last person that had it did. Inscryption is a treasure map built on top of a game, built on top of a secret, with living, breathing characters accidentally folded away in each and every one of its layers. And it is most certainly not a normal game. Hello my children, thank you for watching. What a game, huh? Thanks to the several people who recommended it to me, and a huge shout out to fellow YouTuber Chariot Rider, who actually made me aware of the whole Magic Circle concept. He does gaming essays like I do, and he has done a wonderful one on the Magic Circle that I highly recommend. It goes into a lot more detail on how and why it works in gaming. Link in the description and on screen in just a moment. Be sure to give it a watch. Thanks as always to the heroes of the channel, my tremendous Patreon supporters, especially this month's featured patrons: Benjamin Hall, Justin McDermott, Mervyn Swervin, LaShiren, Lan Anthony Tang, Scott713, Chris Williamson, and Torrin Rogers. If you want to see your name at the end of future videos, get weekly behind-the-scenes updates, early access, commentary live streams, and video editing live streams, it's only $1 a month to get all that and more. Click that link on screen if you'd like to join us. Thanks again, my friends. Take care, and have a damn good one. Turn the game off.